Della Corwin walked 11 miles of frozen ruts to the Merrick place, and the first thing she saw was a steer down in the mud, with its shoulder swelled black as a stove lid. She didn't flinch. She knelt. 3 weeks back, Wade Merrick had run her off his porch with the whole town road watching. Coldwater's got no wages for a woman who buried her own, he told her. Now 4 of his steers were dead by breakfast. 40 heads stood in the wet bottom, waiting their turn. She untied an oilcloth bundle from her hip. She set a brass needle on his rail. "I can stop it by Sunday," she said. "My husband learned how before this town killed his name." Cut there. Before he answered, "This story is for anyone who was ever sent away by the very people who'd end up needing them most. If you believe love is built with 2 pairs of hands, this story is for you." Before we go on, if these stories mean something to you, subscribe so the next one finds you. And do me a small thing. Comment what city you're watching from. I like knowing where these old stories land. Now, back to the cold and the mud. Let me take you back a little, to before she came the second time. Back to a man alone. Coldwater Bend sat in a fold of the Montana Territory, where the grass ran gold in the fall and the wind came down off the high country with teeth in it. It was 1878. The kind of country that made a man's shoulders and then bent them. Wade Merrick was 41 years old, and he had been alone on his father's ground for 3 winters since the fever took his wife. Her name had been Ruth. He didn't say it much anymore. Saying it opened a door he kept shut. The Merrick place ran south from the house down to a spring-fed bottom where the water never quit, even in a dry year. That water was the reason his father had planted here 40 years back, driving stakes into ground nobody else wanted. It was the best of the outfit and the worst of it, both. The best because cattle need water. The worst because the low ground held the wet, and the wet held things a man couldn't see. Wade didn't think about that yet. In the fall of 1878, he thought about his herd. He had 110 head, near enough. Red backs and white faces, sound stock built up over years of careful buying and careful keeping. To the town, that herd was a number. To Wade, it was the last living thing he had a hand in. He knew them the way another man might know a congregation. He knew the old lead cow with the split ear who'd bring the rest down to water if you just walked out ahead of her. He knew the young steer that spooked at his own shadow. He knew which ones came to the fence and which ones held back. He talked to them. He'd have denied it if you asked. But out there in the cold morning with his breath hanging white, a man talks to what's living, or he talks to nobody at all. He loved them. That's the plain word for it, and I won't dress it up. After Ruth, the animals were the thing he tended, and tending was the only kind of love he had left in him. He didn't go to church. He didn't sit at the store and jaw. He worked, and he fed, and he watched over stock, and that was his whole religion. There was a mortgage on the place. There always was. His father had borrowed against the land in a bad year and never quite climbed back out, and Wade had inherited the note along with the ground. A cattle loan through the Territorial Stock and Land Bank. $1,240, due at fall shipping. He meant to pay it the way ranchers always meant to pay it. Drive the beef to the cars, sell. Count the money on the counter, walk out square for 1 more year. He didn't worry about it much. He had the herd. The herd was money on the hoof. As long as the herd was sound, the note was just paper. Now, there was a thing the town said, and I want you to keep it in your pocket, because it comes back around. When somebody's stock took sick, or a well went bad, or a calf came wrong, the old-timers in Coldwater had a way of spitting in the dust and saying it was the Corwin name catching up with them. A curse word. A thing you said to explain bad luck. Years back, before Wade's time on his own, there'd been a plague among the cattle up and down the valley. A killing sickness. And the territory's own veterinarian, a man named Corwin, had been the one to take the blame for it. The story went that Corwin's method made it worse, that his cutting and his cures spread the thing instead of stopping it. Half the valley lost stock that year, and when they went looking for a man to hang the loss on, they hung it on the doctor. Amos Corwin died a few years after that. Poor and spat upon, with his name a joke in every barn in the county. Wade half believed the story. Not because he'd studied it. Because everybody said it, and a man mostly believes what everybody says. He'd have told you the Corwin name was bad luck the way he'd have told you it might snow, not thinking, just repeating. He didn't know the whole of it. Nobody did. That's the vault. Leave it shut for now. He surely had. Now come forward to the morning it started to go wrong. A rider came down the lane while the frost was still white on the north side of the fence posts. Wade knew the horse before he knew the man. It was Harlan Voss, off the bank, in a town coat that had never seen a day's real work. Voss rode the way clerks ride, careful, like the horse might tell on him. Wade set down the bucket he was carrying and waited by the corral. He didn't ask him in. You didn't ask the bank in. Merrick, Voss said, touching his hat. Polite, Voss was always polite. That was the thing about him. He'd take the roof off your head and thank you for the weather while he did it. Voss, I'll not keep you. I know it's your busy time. He drew a folded paper from inside the coat and held it out across the rail. The note. 1,240. It falls due at fall shipping, per the terms your father signed. That's 21 days, near as I count. Wade took the paper. He didn't unfold it. He knew what it said. I know when it's due. Course you do. Voss's eyes went out past him, down toward the bottom where the cattle were dark shapes in the low mist. He counted them the way a man counts money. Handsome herd. You'll make your drive easy. I only ride out because the bank likes its papers walked to the door. No hard feeling in it. None taken, Wade said, and meant it more or less. 21 days, Voss said again, gentle as a preacher. No herd, no payment. And no payment, he let it hang. He didn't have to finish it. Every rancher in the territory could finish it in his sleep. No payment, the land. Then he touched his hat again and rode back up the lane, and that was that, a polite little killing, done and gone before the sun cleared the ridge. Wade stood there with the paper in his fist. 21 days. He wasn't afraid. He had 110 head of sound cattle and the best water in the bend. What was there to be afraid of? He found out 2 days later. It was a young steer, one of the 2-year-olds, down in the bottom near the willows. Wade found him in the morning, and he knew before he got close that it was bad because the animal wasn't struggling. He was just down. Breathing hard, eyes gone dull, and on his near shoulder a swelling the size of a churn, hot and tight under the hide. When Wade pressed it with his thumb, it crackled. A dry, awful sound, like crushing straw inside the meat. The steer was dead within the hour. By that night, 2 more were down. By the next morning, a 4th. All of them the same. Big, healthy young stock, never the old ones, never the poor ones, always the thriving. Down in the bottom, shoulder or hip swelled black and crackling, dead before a man could do much of anything. Wade did the only thing he knew. It was the thing his father had done, and his father before him. When an animal's blood went bad, you bled it. You opened a vein and let the sickness run out with the red. It was old as ranching. It was old as farming. It was, he was sure, the thing a man did. He bled the next sick one himself, out in the cold, hands shaking. And the steer died anyway. Died faster, if anything. He bled another, same. He stood in the bottom, with blood to his wrists and his good stock dying around him, and for the first time in a long while, Wade Merrick was afraid. Because it wasn't stopping. It was spreading. Every morning there were more, and every one that died was a piece of the note, a piece of the land, a piece of the last thing he loved, going into the cold ground. He didn't sleep. He walked the bottom at night with a lantern, and he couldn't have told you what he was looking for. A cause. A reason. Something to fight. But there was nothing to fight, just the water and the mud and the dark, and in the morning, another one down. 21 days. And his herd was dying in front of him, and he didn't know why, and he didn't know how to stop it. That's when she came back. He heard the dog first, his old cattle dog, low and uncertain, and then he looked up from the 5th dead steer of the week and saw a woman walking down the lane on foot. 11 miles she'd come, on foot, over frozen ruts, with a bundle at her hip and her chin set against the wind. Della Corwin, the widow he'd run off his porch 3 weeks back. You have to understand what it cost her to come. He'd shamed her on the town road, in front of everyone, over wages for a day's work. Coldwater's got no wages for a woman who buried her own. She'd have had every right to keep walking that day and never look back at the Merrick name. Instead, here she was, coming down his lane again, uninvited, straight toward the man who'd humiliated her. She didn't come for him. Understand that too. She came for the cattle. She'd have told you so herself, flat, no softness in it. She couldn't walk a road, knowing animals were dying of a thing she knew how to stop. That was the shape of her. Hard on the outside, and underneath the hardness, a thing she couldn't switch off no matter how the world had treated her. She stopped at the fence and looked at the steer at his feet, at the swelled black shoulder. She didn't flinch. She'd seen it before. "You're bleeding them," she said. Not a question. Wade straightened up, defensive as a man is when he's failing. "It's what you do. It's the worst thing you could do." She said it plain, no heat. "You're cutting them open and turning them loose in the mud where it lives. You might as well hand it to the next one direct." She let her eyes go down the bottom, over the standing 40 head, over the dark willows and the wet ground shining. How many since it started? He didn't want to answer her. He answered her. 9. You'll lose the bottom half of your herd inside a week if you keep on the way you're going. She untied the oilcloth bundle from her hip, unrolled a corner of it against the fence rail, and set something on the wood, a brass needle, long, with a bit of polished bone at the head of it. It caught the gray light. "Or you can do what I tell you, and I can stop it by Sunday." He looked at the needle. He looked at her. Every ugly thing the town said about the Corwin name was right there in his mouth, ready. Bad luck. Cursed, the doctor who made the plague worse. He could have said any of it and sent her back down the lane a second time, and no man in Coldwater would have blamed him. But he had 9 dead steers and no idea in the world how to stop the 10th. "Say what you mean to do," he said. It cost him. She heard that it cost him, and she didn't make him say it twice. "First thing," she said, and she was already climbing through the fence, "we deal with the dead ones. All of them. The ones you dragged off, wherever you dragged them. Where are they?" He pointed to the wash behind the barn where he'd been hauling the carcasses. She walked to it and looked down and made a low sound in her throat, disgust and understanding both. "There's your seedbed," she said. "Right there. This thing doesn't die when the animal dies. It goes into the ground and it waits. Spores, my husband's word for it. It can lie in that dirt for years, and every rain washes a little of it back down into your bottom, where your livestock drinks and lies down. You've been dragging your dead into a hole and calling it done. You've been feeding it." Wade felt something turn over in his chest. He'd been doing everything wrong. Worse than wrong, he'd been helping the thing along, every step, with his own 2 hands. "What do I do?" "You burn them," she said. "All of them. Hot, down to the bone, no half measures. And what won't burn, you bury deep, deeper than you think, 6 feet at the least, and you pack quicklime in with them, thick, before the dirt goes back. The lime kills what the fire misses. You do that with every animal that drops, the same day it drops, from here on out. You don't drag them off. You don't leave them for the coyotes to open up and spread. You burn, and you lime, and you bury deep. It was a hard day's work she was describing, on top of everything, with the note 20 days off and his back already broke with grief and no sleep. He could have argued. Instead, he went and got the coal oil and the shovel and the sledge for breaking ground, and he started. They worked till dark. Her too, she didn't stand and point. She took a shovel and dug beside him, and when the ground came up frozen, she swung the pick as steady as any man, 11 miles already in her legs. They dragged the carcasses onto a pyre of split logs and doused them and set them alight, and the smoke went up black and greasy and stinking into the cold sky, and the whole of Coldwater Bend could see it for miles and wonder what the Merrick outfit was burning. Let them wonder. By the time the fire had them down to bone, it was full dark and bitter, and the two of them stood by the heat of it, suited to the elbows, not talking. Wade looked at the deep hole they'd dug, packed white with lime at the bottom, and he understood a thing he hadn't understood that morning. This woman knew something real. Not luck. Not a curse. Knowledge, the hard, particular kind a man builds over years. The town said the Corwin name was poison, but the town had never watched her swing that pick, or heard her name the thing in the ground before she ever saw it kill. "You'll want to sleep," he said rough, because he didn't know how to say the other thing. "There's the line shack, down past the barn. It's rough, but it's dry." She looked at him a moment. Measuring, then she picked up her bundle and the brass needle off the rail, where it had sat all day, catching the firelight now, and she went down toward the shack without a word. That was the first day. That was the first degree of it. Not trust, not yet, but the crack where trust gets in. He did what she said because the dying, for the first time in a week, showed the first small sign of slowing. By Sunday, like she'd told him, no fresh ones had dropped in 2 days. 2 whole days. After a week of burying his herd, 2 days of nothing felt like a miracle. Wade stood in the bottom Sunday morning and counted his standing stock, and the number hadn't gone down, and something loosened in his chest that had been clamped tight since Voss rode out. She hadn't stopped it for good. She was careful to tell him that. "The dead ones are handled," she said, "so it's not seeding fresh. But the ground down here is still wet, and this thing lives in wet ground. Every one of these standing in this bottom is standing in danger. That's the next thing. But first you need lime, more than you've got, and cord, and I need a few things from the store." She looked at him. "And that means town. Town, where he'd shamed her on the road 3 weeks back, where the smoke of his burning had been seen for 2 days, where the whole of Coldwater already had its opinion cooking. He hitched the wagon. They rode in together. That was the thing that did it, that they rode in together, the ruined man and the Corwin widow, up the main road of Coldwater Bend on a Sunday when everyone was out. He felt the eyes before they even reached the store. Women on the boardwalk who stopped their talk. Men at the rail who turned to watch the wagon come. He'd forgotten, or made himself forget, what it would look like. It looked like exactly what it was, and Coldwater read it in a heartbeat. The widow. The mortgaged man. The two of them, side by side on a wagon seat, come to town together. He felt the shame of it heat his neck. And then he felt something else, harder and better. A stubbornness. Let them look. He pulled up at the Mercantile, and that's where August Frame was waiting. Though waiting makes it sound like an accident, and it was no accident. Frame was the kind of man who was always exactly where the crowd was thickest. He was the biggest cattle interest in 3 counties, a heavy, easy man in a good coat, with a way of talking loud enough that the boardwalk could hear him whether they wanted to or not. "Wade Merrick," Frame called out, and heads turned all down the road. "We saw your fire from the Frame place. Saw it 2 days running." He shook his head, slow, sorrowful, loud. That's Blackleg smoke if I ever smelled it. My condolences, Wade. Truly, there's no worse luck a man can have. I'm handling it, Wade said. Are you? Frame stepped down off the boardwalk into the road, and now the whole street was his audience, and he knew it, and he played it. Because, I'll be honest with you, neighbor, out of pure Christian feeling. A herd with Blackleg in it doesn't ship. The cars won't take it, the buyers won't touch it, and a man with a banknote coming due, he spread his hands, all sympathy, all daggers. Well, everybody knows your note, Wade. It's no secret. There it was, laid on the road in front of the whole town. His debt. His dying herd. His 20 days. So here's what I'll do, Frame went on, warming to it. I'll take the sick place off your hands. As is. I'll assume the note and give you a little on top to walk away clean so you don't lose everything. You start over somewhere fresh, no Blackleg, no debt hanging over you. It's more than a hard luck man could hope for. He turned a little, so the boardwalk could admire his generosity. And I'll want it on the record, in front of these good people, that the water writes on that bottom pass with the land. Spring-fed. Never dry. That water's the only thing on the place worth having now, and I'll want it clean and clear when the papers move. And there it was. The whole of it. Frame didn't want to rescue him. Frame wanted the water. He'd wanted that spring-fed bottom for years. And now he stood in the public road with the whole town for witnesses, buying a ruined man's ruin cheap and calling it a kindness. Wade opened his mouth, and he honestly didn't know what would come out. Maybe he'd have taken it. A drowning man grabs what floats. In front of all those eyes, worn down to the bone, 20 days from losing everything, maybe he'd have said yes. He never got the chance to find out. Della Corwin stepped down off the wagon. She came around slow, deliberate, and she stood beside the wagon wheel, with her bundle at her hip and the brass needle showing at the top of the oilcloth, and she looked at August Frame the way you'd look at a snake you'd already decided wasn't fast enough to worry you. His herd will ship, she said. The road went quiet. Somebody had said something, out loud against August Frame, and it was her, the Corwin widow, the cursed name. The woman half of them had watched Wade Merrick throw off his porch not a month gone. Frame turned, and his easy face did a thing when he saw her. Just for a flicker. Most of the town missed it. Wade didn't. It was the look of a man who'd seen a ghost he thought he'd buried, and it was gone so fast that afterward Wade wondered if he'd imagined it. But he hadn't. Keep that in your pocket, too. And who's this? Frame said, loud again, recovered, playing to the crowd. You've taken on help, Wade, from the... He let the pause do the work, the Corwin outfit. Well, a ripple of low laughter down the boardwalk. That explains the fire. He was inviting the town to laugh at her, and the town was ready to. She was everything they'd learned to look down on, a widow, a drifter, a hard-luck woman with a cursed name and dirt under her nails, standing in the public road contradicting the richest man in the county. She didn't move. She didn't color up. She let the laughter go by like weather. His herd will ship, she said again, same flat certainty. Because the dying's already stopped. Ask him. She didn't look at Wade. She looked at Frame, and only at Frame. You're welcome to come out and see for yourself, mister. Frame, I'd think a man so worried about his neighbor would want to know exactly what's in that bottom, and exactly how it got there. A beat. Wouldn't you? It was a strange thing to say. It went over the heads of the crowd, who heard only that the strange woman was talking back. But it didn't go over Frame's head. His jaw set. The genial mask stayed up, but behind it something had gone cold and watchful. You should keep better company, Wade, was all he said, and he stepped back up onto the boardwalk and let the crowd close between them. Wade climbed down and went into the store and bought his lime and his cord with the town's eyes on his back the whole way. When he came out, Della was standing exactly where he'd left her, at the wagon wheel, unmoved, unbothered, waiting. And on the same road where he had once told her Coldwater had no wages for her, she stood at his wagon and would not be run off. They rode out with the lime in the back and the whole town watching them go, and Coldwater Bend made up its mind about the pair of them that Sunday, the way small towns do. The widow and the ruined man. Let them talk. Wade drove a while before he spoke. "You knew him," he said. "Frame, that was more than not liking his offer. You knew him." She looked straight down the road. "I know his kind," she said, which was and wasn't an answer, and he was too tired and too grateful to press her on it. Now the work turned. The dead were handled. The next thing was the living, and the living were standing in a poisoned bottom. "This ground is the whole trouble," she told him. Out in the wet the next morning, boots sunk to the ankle in the black mud. "It's low. It holds the water. And this sickness loves wet low ground, the way rot loves a damp cellar. Every head you keep down here is lying down in it every night. You've got high ground up the north slope, dry, above the spring. That's where they go. All of them, today, the sound and the doubtful both. Off the wet, onto the dry, and you keep them there." It was a 2-day drive to move the herd up the north slope, and they did it in one long, brutal push because there wasn't time for two. Wade knew his cattle, and Della knew the sickness, and between the two kinds of knowing, they got it done. She rode a borrowed horse like she'd been born to it. She read the stock. She could pick the ones brewing sick before they showed it. Some way of watching how an animal set its feet, how it held its head, and she cut those out and kept them close. By dark, the herd was up on the dry ground, off the poisoned bottom for the first time in weeks, and the change in them over the next days was a thing Wade could see with his own eyes. Fewer down. Then none down. The high, dry ground did what she'd said it would, but the doubtful ones, the ones she'd cut and kept close, those were the next fight. And that was the night she taught him the needle. You've seen it teased since the first minute of this, the brass needle with the bonehead wrapped in oilcloth that she set on his rail the day she came. Now you learn what it's for. "It's called a seton," she said. They were in the light shack by lantern, and she had the needle out and a length of cord soaking in something from a brown bottle that smelled sharp enough to sting the eyes. You take a good clean cord, and you treat it. My husband had the making of the treatment. It's on this cord right now, and you thread it through the dewlap. The loose skin under the throat. Here, she touched her own throat to show him. You draw the cord all the way through and leave it, tied. And what it does, she paused, and for the first time there was something in her voice that wasn't Flint, something that was almost her husband speaking through her. What it does is raise a swelling, on purpose, in a place the animal can survive. It turns the sickness, pulls it out to the throat, where it can't kill, instead of leaving it to strike the shoulder or the flank, where it can. Amos worked years to get the treatment on the cord right. Most men who'd try this would just be sticking a dirty string through a cow's neck and making it worse. The whole thing is in the treatment, and the treatment is his. It was the first time she'd said his name to him. Amos. They worked the whole night, steer by steer, the doubtful ones, in the cold and the lantern light. She showed him the first one, how to hold the head, where exactly to enter, how to draw the treated cord through clean and tie it so it stayed. Then, she made him do the next one himself, her hands over his the first time. Then, just her voice. Then, not even that. His big hands, that had bled his cattle wrong for a week and killed them doing it, learned to do the thing right. Learned it from her. Somewhere past midnight, she made coffee on the shack's little stove, and he noticed she took it black, and scalding, no sugar, drinking it fast enough to hurt, the way a person does who's learned not to expect there to be more. He didn't remark on it, but he noticed it, and he kept it, the way a man keeps a small true thing. Toward morning she fell asleep sitting up against the shack wall, the needle still in her hand, worn clean through by 11 miles and days of work and one full night without stopping. Wade sat across from her in the last of the lantern. He looked at her a long while. Then he took the blanket off the shack's cot and laid it over her. Careful, so as not to wake her, and he saw as he did it that the shack's step outside the door was broke half through, a hazard in the dark. He spent the hour before dawn mending it by lantern, quiet as he could, so she could sleep. He couldn't have told you why. He only knew that a woman who'd walked 11 miles to save his herd shouldn't break her leg on his rotten step. And that was the turn, the quiet one, under everything else. The dying had stopped spreading. The herd was up on dry ground. The doubtful ones wore the cord now, and it was too soon to know but not too soon to hope. And Wade Merrick, who 3 weeks back had run this woman off his porch, sat in a cold shack watching her sleep and felt, for the first time since he'd buried Ruth, something in him that wasn't grief. The pain had turned to resolve. He wasn't losing anymore. He was fighting. And he had someone at his shoulder who knew how to fight, and the two of them together were doing what he alone could never have done. But there was still the note. $1,240, and the days running out, and a herd that might live now but hadn't yet walked to the cars. Fighting the sickness had cost days, and it had cost money. The lime, the cord, the store bill on frames watching road. Hope wasn't dollars, and a saved herd that couldn't ship in time was worth exactly nothing against paper. 2 mornings after the long night, Wade hitched the wagon alone, before light, and pointed it toward town. Della watched him from the shack door. "Where are you going?" she asked. "The bank," he said. He wasn't going to beg Voss for an extension. He'd made up his mind about that somewhere in the mending of the step. He was going to do something a careful man would never do. He was going to walk in front of Harlan Voss and whatever witnesses were handy and stake his whole herd, and the land under it, on a dead man's cure and a cast-out widow's hands, signed to ship on the fall drive or forfeit the place outright, betting everything on Della Corwin in front of the very bank that was waiting to take it all. He hadn't told her that part. Not yet. He slapped the lines, and the wagon rolled up the dark lane, and behind him, Della Corwin stood in the shack doorway with the brass needle in her hand, watching him go toward the one building in Coldwater Bend that could finish him with a stroke of a pen, and not knowing, yet, what he was about to wager on her, or that August frame would be waiting inside. The bank sat at the end of Coldwater Bend's one street, brick where everything else was board, and Wade tied the wagon to the rail out front while the sky was still the color of ash. Lamps were lit inside. That was the first wrong thing. A bank had no cause to burn oil before the town was even up. He went in. Harlan Voss stood behind the counter in his shirt sleeves, and he wasn't alone. August Frame sat in the good chair by the stove with his hat on his knee and his boots crossed, easy as a man in his own parlor. He'd been waiting. He looked up at Wade, and he smiled the way a man smiles at a card he already knows he's holding. "Merrick," Frame said. "You're early. Man with a clean conscience sleeps in." Wade didn't answer him. He looked at Voss. "I've come to talk about the note," Wade said. Voss folded his hands on the counter. He had soft hands, and a soft voice, and a way of sounding sorry while he cut your throat. "The note falls due at fall shipping. Miss Merrick, $1,240. That's 20 days off now. I take it you've come to discuss terms." "I've come to give you terms," Wade said. That got a flicker out of both of them. Frame uncrossed his boots. "I'm going to ship on the fall drive," Wade said. "The whole herd. 110 head. Near enough. I'll pay the note off the sale on the counter here, coin by coin. And I'll put it in writing this morning, in front of you and any 2 men you care to bring, that if I don't ship in time, I forfeit the place outright. No extension asked, none given. The land against the herd. That's my terms." Voss's soft face didn't move much, but his eyes did. "That's a hard bet, Mr. Merrick. Your herd's got the Blackleg in it. Half this county knows it. You'd stake the land your father broke on cattle that are dying in the mud?" "They've stopped dying," Wade said. Frame laughed. It was a low, comfortable sound. "They've stopped dying," he repeated, like it was the funniest thing he'd heard in a season. "On account of the Corwin woman, I'd guess. That what you're staking your daddy's ground on? A brass needle and a dead man's name that this town run out of the territory for killing 40 head of good stock?" Wade turned and looked at him then. Really looked. And something in the way Frame said the Corwin name, too ready, too rehearsed, like a man who'd said it many times before and liked the taste, went into Wade and stuck there. He filed it next to the flicker he'd seen on the store road. The private one. The one a man shows when he sees a ghost he thought he'd buried. "You seem to know a great deal about the Corwins," Wade said. Frame's smile held, but it went flat behind the eyes. "Everybody knows about the Corwins." "No," Wade said slowly. "They don't. They know a name to spit at. You know more than that." For a moment nobody said anything. The stove ticked. Then Frame stood up, unhurried, and set his hat on his head, and the ease came back into him like water finding its level. "Sign your paper, Merrick," he said. "Stake your ground on a widow's tricks. When your cattle drop in the high pasture, and they will, I'll buy your daddy's land off this bank for the price of the back taxes, and I'll drain your spring for my own herd, and this whole town will nod and say the Merrick boy should have known better than to trust Corwin luck." He put his hand on the door. "I've waited on that water a long time. I can wait 20 more days." He went out into the gray morning. Wade watched the door swing shut. His heart was going hard, but his hands were steady, and that surprised him, because a careful man's hands would have been shaking. He turned back to Voss. "Get your 2 witnesses," he said. "I'll sign." And he did. He signed his father's land away against a dead man's cure and a cast-out widow's hands in front of Harlan Voss and the smith and the liveryman before the sun cleared the ridge. He rode home with the copy folded in his coat and the weight of it sitting where his ribs met. Della was at the wash trough when he drove in. She had her sleeves shoved up and her forearms red from the cold water, and she straightened when she saw his face. "What did you do?" she said. Not a question. She'd read it off him the way she read a swelled shoulder off a steer. So he told her. All of it. The paper. The terms. The land against the herd. And Frame in the good chair, waiting, and the way Frame said her husband's name. She listened without a word until he was done. Then she sat down slow on the edge of the trough, and the red went out of her face, and she looked at the mud between her boots for a long time. "You staked your father's ground on me," she said. "And you didn't ask. There wasn't time to ask." "There was," she said. "You just knew what I'd say." She looked up. "I'd have told you not to. You should never bet a thing that can't be gotten back on a person. People fail. I've watched a good man fail in front of a whole territory and never get up from it." "You mean your husband?" She didn't answer that. She stood up and pushed her sleeves down and went back to the shack, and Wade let her go, because he could see she was carrying something too heavy to set down in a wash yard at daybreak. That was the 12th day. The days after were the good days, though he wouldn't know to call them that till later. The first swelled but savable steer, a big red 3-year-old that had gone down in the high pasture with his near shoulder blown up hard as a drumhead, that steer pulled through. Della sat with him 2 days. She threaded the seton cord through the loose skin of his dewlap and drew it back and forth twice a day to pull the sickness down to the site where it couldn't kill him, and she packed the swelling and kept him off his feet, and on the second morning the steer heaved up onto his legs on his own and blew snot on her apron and walked to the water. Wade watched him drink. He felt something come loose in his chest that had been wound tight since the first steer dropped. "He'll ship," Della said. She was gray with tiredness. He'll never be a prize. That near shoulder'll always sit crooked. But he'll walk to the cars and weigh out, and that's a steer that was dead a week ago. The count of the dead stopped climbing. 9 head lost, and then no more. 9 dead steers in the burned pit under the quicklime, and after the 12th day, not one more went into it. The herd stood on the dry high ground and put its heads down and grazed, and the wet bottom lay empty and poisoned below them, and it looked, for a stretch of days, like they had won. In those days, Wade learned things about her without meaning to. He learned she took her coffee black, and so hot it should have scalded the mouth off her, and that she'd give a hard look to any cup that came to her cooled or cut with milk. He started making it right without being asked. He'd set it by her hand on the shack step, black and steaming, and she'd wrap both red hands around it and not say thank you, because thank you wasn't a thing she spent. But she'd hold it a beat too long against her palms, and he took that for what it was. She learned things about him too. She was the only one who saw that he wasn't eating. During the worst of the die-off, he'd pushed his plate away 3 suppers running, and while the smith and the liveryman and the whole town saw a stubborn man staking his ground on foolishness, Della saw a man who couldn't get food past the fear in his throat. She started cooking smaller, plainer, things a knotted-up man could get down. Fried mush and salt pork, nothing fine. She'd set it in front of him and turn her back and busy herself so he didn't have to eat under a watch, and he got it down easier for that. Neither of them said a word about any of it. That wasn't how it was built. It was built with hands. Then, on the 16th day, the sickness came back. Wade found them at first light, 3 head down in the high pasture, up on the dry ground where Blackleg had no business being. Shoulders swelled black. One already dead and stiff, the other 2 blowing hard and rolling their eyes, and the smell of it, that sweet, rotten gas smell, coming up off them into the clean, cold morning where it should not have been. He stood over them, and his gut went to water. The high ground was supposed to be safe. That was the whole of it. Blackleg lived in the wet, in the low bottom, in the spores in the mud. Della had said it a dozen times. Dry ground breaks the chain. And here were 3 head down on the driest, highest slope on the place, a full day's climb above the poisoned bottom, sick as anything he'd buried. Della came up the slope with the needle bundle already on her hip. She knelt by the 2 live ones and put her hand flat on the swelled shoulders, and she went very still, and Wade watched the certainty go out of her face for the first time since she'd walked 11 miles up his lane. "This is wrong," she said quietly. "It's the same sickness. It's the same sickness in the wrong place." She stood and looked down the slope and up it, at the little seep spring that fed the high pasture's waterhole, and something moved behind her eyes that he couldn't name. Wade, Blackleg doesn't climb. It doesn't leave good dry ground and jump a day's walk uphill onto better ground. It doesn't. She wiped her hand slow down her apron. Somebody put it here. But he didn't hear that part right. Not then. What he heard, standing over a dead steer with the note folded in his coat and his father's land signed away against exactly this, was that the cure had failed. That he'd staked everything on a widow and a dead man's needle, and the widow was wrong, and the dead man was wrong, and Frame had been right in the good chair by the stove, when your cattle drop in the high pasture, and they will. And she saw it. She saw the doubt go across his face like a shadow crossing a field. She'd been watched with that exact look before, by a whole territory, and she knew it the way you know a smell from your childhood. The town knew by noon. Word travels fast when it's the word people want. By the time Wade drove in for more lime, the store road had it already. The Corwin cure had failed. The Merrick herd was dropping again, up on the high ground this time, where even the widow said it couldn't happen. Corwin luck, they said on the boardwalk, saying it to each other but loud enough for him. Corwin luck. Same as her husband. kills the very stock it swears to save. He came home hard. He didn't mean to bring it into the yard with him, but it was on him like mud, and she saw it the second he stepped down. "Say it," she said. "I didn't say anything. You've got it on your face. The whole town's got it. Say it. You think I failed. You think my husband's cure is killing your herd the same as they said it killed those 40 heads 6 years back." Her voice didn't rise. That was the worst of it. It went flat and dead and old. "Go on. 3 head are dead on the high ground, Della, on the dry ground. You told me the dry ground was safe. It is safe. Then how? Because somebody carried it up there. And now it did rise. One crack of it, and then she pulled it back down. She stood in the yard with her fists at her sides and her jaw set, and Wade watched her decide something. He watched her walk up to a wall she'd kept between herself and every soul in 3 counties for 6 years, and put her hand on it, and push it over. "You want to know how I know Blackleg doesn't climb," she said. "You want to know how I know somebody carried it up your slope. Sit down, Wade Merrick. I'm going to tell you the thing I've never told a living person in this territory, and then you can turn me off this place like you did the first time. Or not, but you'll do it knowing the truth for once." He sat on the shack step, the one he'd mended. "My name is Della Corwin," she said, "and Amos Corwin wasn't a name I married into off a wagon. He was my husband and my teacher both. I was his apprentice before I was his wife. He was the territory veterinarian out of Miles City, the only man in 400 miles who'd read the new books on what lived in the ground, and what made a sound animal go down overnight. He knew Blackleg before anybody out here had a name for it. He knew it lived in the wet bottoms as spores. He knew you burned and limed the dead and moved the sound stock high and dry, and he knew the seton, and he taught it all to me with his own hands, and there is not one thing I've done on your place that I didn't learn standing at his shoulder." "I know he was a vet," Wade said. The town says he killed 40 head with his own doctoring and got run out of the territory for it, and drank himself dead in a rented room in Deadwood 2 winters later. That's what the town says." She was very steady now, the way a person gets past the shaking. "Here's what happened. 6 years back, a die-off hit the least bottoms east of here. Blackleg, bad, near 100 head across 4 small outfits, little men, mortgaged men just like you. Amos went out, and he did exactly what I've done here. Burned, limed, moved the stock high, setoned the doubtful ones. And the dying slowed. Same as here. Then it flared again, up on the high ground, where it couldn't. She let that sit between them. Just like your 3 head this morning, cattle down sick a day's climb above any wet the disease could live in. And Amos stood on that high slope, and he said the same words I said to you at dawn. This is wrong. Somebody put it here. And nobody believed him. Because the man who wanted those 4 little outfits ruined and bought cheap had already gone to town ahead of the news and planted the story. That the Corwin cure was a fraud. That the Eastern book doctor had killed the herds himself with his fool needle. And the town, which never trusts a cure it doesn't understand over a plain man's fear, believed the story it wanted. Her mouth twisted. By the time Amos worked out how the sickness climbed, his name was already dead. No one would let him near a sick animal to prove it. They ran us out. 4 ruined outfits, sold for back taxes to the one big interest that had money to buy in a bad year. And Amos never got up from it. It's not the Blackleg that killed my husband Wade. It's being right, in front of people who'd rather he be a villain. Wade sat still. The mended step was solid under his boots, and the thing that had been snagged in him since the bank, the way Frame said the Corwin name, too ready, the private flicker on the store road, turned over and showed its underside. The big interest that bought the 4 ruined outfits, Wade said slowly. 6 years back. East of here. You already know his name, Della said. August Frame. August Frame. She said it without heat now, which was somehow worse. He drove his own diseased stock down through those leased bottoms the year before the die-off. Amos found the tracks of it after, and a freighter who'd hauled dead beeves for him in the dark and buried them shallow above the springs where the melt would carry the spores down into the good water. Amos found the how of it. He just found it too late, and with no soul left who'd listen. She looked up the slope toward the high pasture where 3 head lay dead on impossible ground. And now it's happening on your place. Your high spring. Salted, Wade, that water's been salted with the same poison, carried up and buried by the same kind of paid hand, so that your herd drops where it can't drop, and the town says, Corwin luck. And you lose your nerve and your land in the same week, and August Frame buys your spring off this bank for the price of the back taxes. He said it to your face in that bank this morning. He told you exactly how it ends. He's just done it before. For a long moment Wade couldn't speak. Then she stood up, and she reached down and took up the oilcloth bundle from beside the step, the brass needle and the treated cord, and she began to wrap it to carry. "What are you doing?" he said. "The same thing I've done for 6 years," she said, "leaving before I'm run. I was wrong to stay this long. I told you not to bet a thing on me, and I meant it, because this always comes. A man believes the hands right up until the town says the name, and then he believes the town. I felt you do it twice now, on your porch 3 weeks back, and in that yard this morning. I'll not stand for a third." She got the bundle tied. "You've got a paper says ship or forfeit. I'm sorry for that. I'd undo it if I could. But I can't cure a herd for a man who's already halfway to believing I'm poisoning it, and I won't try." She started down the lane, 11 miles of frozen ruts the way she'd come, the needle on her hip, her back straight the way it had been straight when she knelt to a dying steer instead of flinching, and Wade Merrick sat on his mended step and let her get 20 steps down the lane before the whole of it came together in him at once. The flicker, the good chair, the too-ready name, the high ground where the disease could not climb, salted, carried, buried above the spring by a paid hand in the dark. He was on his feet before he decided to be. Della, she didn't stop. He caught her at the gate. He didn't grab her. He got in front of her and stood in the lane so she'd have to walk through him. "You said Amos found the how of it," Wade said, breathing hard. "The dead beeves buried shallow above the spring, the freighter who hauled them. You said he found the tracks, just too late." He took her by the shoulders, careful, the way you'd steady a doubtful animal. "It's not too late here. It happened this morning, Della. Whatever Frame's man buried above my high spring, he buried it fresh. Days old. Not years. It's still up there. The freighter that hauled it is still drawing breath in this territory, not dead and gone like your husband's proof." His voice dropped. "You've spent 6 years being right where the proof was already rotted away. This proof is 2 days old and sitting on my own ground. Don't you walk down that lane. Come up the slope with me and let's dig it up before Frame can move it. And this time, we take it to the same road that ran you off, with the poison still wet on it." She stood in the gate a long moment with the needle on her hip. "You'll believe your own eyes over that town?" she said. "When it comes to it? On the store road, in front of the men who watched you turn me off your porch, I signed my father's land against you 2 days ago," Wade said. "I'm done being careful. Come dig." They dug that afternoon. Della found it. She knew where to look. Above the seep spring, on the little bench where a man could get a wagon in the dark. The ground was turned. Fresh, not 2 days old. They went into it with shovels and hit hide a foot down, shallow the way she'd said. The way it had been done to Amos, 3 of Frame's own steers, dead of the blackleg, and hauled up and buried just above the water that fed Wade's high pasture, so the seep would carry the spores down into the drinking hole and drop his sound stock on impossible ground. And Frame's brand was on the hides, burned plain in the hip. The rocking F. There was no reading it any other way. Wade stood over the pit with the smell coming up and his jaw set. Who hauled them? A man doesn't bury his own poison in the dark, Della said. He pays it done. Same as before. Find the freighter, Wade. Find the wagon that came up your bench 2 nights back, and I'll wager it's the same paid hand or the son of the last one. It took him a day. 20 days now gone off the note, 1 left before the fall drive. He rode the low road, and he found the wagon ruts coming off his bench and followed them, and they went to a freight camp on the Coldwater, where a hard-up teamster named Bell kept his outfit, and Bell, when Wade laid it out for him plain, with the fresh rocking F hides dug up, and Frame's ruin already smelling of the law. Bell folded like a wet sack. He'd hauled them up in the dark for $8 and a bottle. He'd do it again in front of anybody Wade liked if it kept his own neck out of a territory noose, because burying diseased stock to poison a neighbor's water was a hanging matter, and Bell had a family and no love for August Frame past the $8. You'll say it on the store road, Wade told him, in front of Voss and the whole town, where he drove them, when, and for what he paid. I'll say it, Bell said. God help me, I should have said it years back when he had my daddy do it out east. Wade went still. Your daddy hauled for Frames 6 years back. East of here. The least bottoms. Bell looked at the ground. The Corwin business, he said quietly. Yes, my daddy hauled the dead beeves that killed those 4 outfits. Frame paid him to bury them shallow and hold his tongue, and my daddy held it and drank on it till it killed him same as it killed the vet. He looked up. I always knew it was Frame did that die off, mister. The whole time that town spit at the Corwin name, I knew. I was a boy that couldn't say so. I can say so now. They came into Coldwater Bend the next morning, the last morning before the drive, and they came in a wagon, all 3, Wade driving, Della on the seat with the oilcloth bundle on her hip, and Bell the freighter in the bed with a rocking F hide dug fresh out of Wade's high ground rolled beside him, still stinking of the sickness. The store road was full. It was drive morning. Every outfit in the county was in town. The same boardwalk that had watched Wade turn Della off his porch 3 weeks back, the same men stood out in the cold sun and watched the Merrick wagon come up the road with the widow on the seat. And August Frame was there. Of course he was. Standing in front of the bank with Harlan Voss beside him, easy, in his good coat, come to town to watch a ruined man forfeit his ground so he could buy the spring off the back taxes, the way it had gone 6 years ago, the way it had always gone. Wade pulled the wagon up in the middle of the road, in front of the bank, in front of all of them. He stood up in the box so his voice would carry. Voss, he called out, you've got a note on my place. $1,240, ship or forfeit, due tomorrow. Before I ship, this town's going to hear something, and you're going to hear it as the bank, because your paper's got Frame's name behind it, and you're about to find out what you've been backing. The road went quiet. Frame's face didn't move, but Wade saw the flicker again, the private one, go across it and get buried. 3 days back, Wade said, loud, somebody buried 3 diseased steers above my high spring to poison my water and drop my sound herd on dry ground where the Blackleg couldn't reach it on its own, so this town would say Corwin luck, and I'd lose my nerve. And August Frame would buy my spring off this bank cheap. He reached down into the bed, and Bell handed it up, and Wade held the fresh hide up over his head, hip brand out, for the whole road to see. That's a rocking F dug this morning, out of my own high ground, 2 days buried. That's Frame's brand on a diseased steer buried above my water. And the man he paid to haul it up is sitting in my wagon. Bell stood up in the bed. His voice shook, but he said it. Bell, freighter, August Frame paid me $8 to haul 3 sick beeves up onto the Merrick bench in the dark and bury them shallow above the spring. 2 nights back, I'll swear it to the territory. And my daddy hauled the same for him 6 years back, east of here, the die-off they hung on the vet. That was Frame, too. The both of them was Frame. The store road made a sound then, a low sound, a lot of men breathing in at once. Frame moved to it fast, smooth, a man who'd talked his way off a low road before. That's a paid lie from a broke freighter and a fool who staked his land on a fraud. Voss, this is the Corwin woman's doing. The same as, "You buried your poison on my water," Wade said. And he didn't shout it, he said it flat and hard, and it carried better than a shout. And you hung his name on it. He came down off the wagon, and he put himself between Della on the seat and the whole staring road, square in front of her. The way he should have stood 3 weeks back, and hadn't. 6 years back you killed 4 little outfits the same way, and let a good man die a drunk in a rented room with the whole territory spitting at his name for a thing you did. Amos Corwin told this town the ground was sick, and he was right. And you buried him under a lie to buy his neighbors cheap. And this is his widow, who walked 11 miles to save the herd of a man who'd run her off his porch, and did it, and asked nothing. His voice went low and level, and every soul on that road leaned to hear it. I'd sooner burn this place to the sills than hand it to the man who did that to her. Frame's arrogance cracked. Right there, in the sun. It went off his face like paint off a wall, and what was under it was a cornered man, and every one of those neighbors saw it happen. Harlan Voss saw it too, and Voss was Frame's man, quietly, the way a bank manager is a big interests man, but Voss was the bank's man first, and the bank had just been shown in front of the whole county that it was holding a note propped up by a criminal poisoning of a neighbor's water. Voss's soft hands came off his lapels. He was doing sums Wade couldn't see, and every sum ended with the Territorial Stock and Land Bank standing in a territory court next to August Frame, and that was a place a soft, careful man would not go for any lien in the world. "Mr. Frame," Voss said, and his voice had changed, gone thin and careful and cold, "you hold a second lien on the Merrick place and a water claim on that spring. Both filed through this bank." He swallowed. "In light of this, I'm voiding them. Both, as of this minute. The bank won't stand behind paper that rests on this." He couldn't even say it, and I'll be sending the whole of it to the Territory Stock Board. The hides, the freighter's statement, all of it. This bank will not be a party to it 1 hour longer than it has been. You can't. Frame started. "I can, and it's done," Voss said, and shut his mouth, and you could see the man frightened for his own skin and moving fast to save it, and it made him honest for exactly 1 morning. It went the way things go when the ground shifts all at once. The Territory Stock Board took Bell's statement and the fresh rocking F hides, and they had 6-year-old dust to shake loose besides. Once a man knew where to look, the 4 ruined outfits, the shallow graves east of here. Bell's dead father's own hauling. August Frame's empire had been built buying ruin cheap, and it turned out, ruin was a thing that could be bought back the other way. Frame stood on the store road holding a voided lien and a worthless water claim and a criminal complaint from the territory, and the neighbors who'd tipped their hats to the biggest cattle interest in 3 counties a day before now stood back from him on the boardwalk like he had the sickness on him, which, in a way, he'd always had. And in the bank, on the floor where it had been damned, Amos Corwin's name was entered cleared. Voss did it himself. Careful. In the ledger, with the whole thing folded into the record, the die-off 6 years back, not the fault of the Corwin method, but the crime of August Frame, and the territory veterinarian, Amos Corwin, exonerated on the books of the same institution that had held his ruin. Della stood on the bank floor and watched the pen move. She didn't gloat. 6 years she'd carried it, and there wasn't gloat left in her, only a kind of long breath going out. Frame was being walked past her toward the door, and he looked at her, the private flicker gone now, nothing left in his face but a man watching his own ruin, and Della gave him one line. Dry, quiet, level. My husband told them the ground was sick, she said. He was right the whole time. Frame had nothing to say to that. There isn't anything a man can say to that. He went out. They shipped the next day. The saved herd came down off the high ground and up the drive road to the cars, 110 head near enough, the high-grounded stock, the setoned doubtful ones, the big red 3-year-old with the crooked near-shoulder walking sound among them, a steer that had been dead a week and wasn't. They loaded onto the cars in the cold with the whole business of it, the bawling and the dust and the good hard weight of live cattle that would weigh out and sell. The count was enough. It was more than enough. And in the bank, on the counter where the note had been drawn, Wade Merrick paid off $1,240 against his father's land. He stacked it in coin and paper, and partway through, without a word, Della's hands came in beside his and stacked with him. Her red-work hard hands laying the coins in beside his own, the two of them counting out the ruin they'd beaten together, on the same counter that had meant to take everything. Voss took the money and marked the note paid and gave Wade the deed clear. The land was his. Free of Frame, free of the bank, free of the note. He drove home with the deed in his coat where the note had been. She started packing that evening. He came up from the pens and found her in the shack rolling her few things into her blanket, the oilcloth bundle already tied on her hip. The herd's shipped, she said, not looking up. Notes paid. Your name's clear on the deed, and my husband's clear on the books. There's nothing left here needs doing that you can't do yourself now. You know the burning, and the liming, and the high ground, and the seton. You know all of it. I taught you every bit. She pulled the blanket roll tight. I'll go on. There's other outfits. There's always other outfits with sickness in them, and no one who knows the cure. That's a life. It's the one I've got. Wade didn't say anything for a moment. Then he went out. She heard him at the door and thought he'd gone for good, gone to let her leave the clean way, and something in her sank even as she told herself it was right. But he came back in. He had something in his hand. He'd been to the peg by his own door, the kitchen door of the house, not the shack, and he'd taken down the thing he'd cleaned and set there 2 days back without telling her. Amos Corwin's oilcloth wrapped brass and bone-setting needle, the one she'd set on his fence rail the first morning, 11 miles walked, a steer down in the mud. He'd cleaned it and oiled the leather and hung it on a peg by the door of his home, where a man hangs a thing that belongs to the house. He set it on the blanket roll in her hands. That hangs by my kitchen door now, he said. I put it there. The thing you were holding when I turned you off my porch. I hung it where a family hangs the things it lives by. He looked at her, 41 and a widower, and not careful anymore about a single thing. You walked 11 miles to save a herd for a man who didn't deserve it, and you did it with that needle. And I've spent every day since watching you build something with your hands and take nothing for it. I don't want to do the burning and the liming and the high ground and the seton myself. I want to do them with you. There's not another outfit in this territory. There's this one. It's yours as much as mine. It lived because of you. He didn't kneel, and he didn't make a speech. He'd learned from her that the real things get built with hands and said in one word, not a pile of them. Stay, he said. Della Corwin stood in the shack with the needle on the blanket in her hands. 6 years of leaving before she was run. 6 years of keeping her worth behind a wall so it couldn't be taken. And a man standing in front of her who'd bet his father's ground on her before he'd even asked, and stood between her and the road that ran her off, and hung her dead husband's needle by his own door. She set the blanket roll down. You take your coffee wrong, she said. Which wasn't yes, except it was, and they both knew it. Black, scalding, same as me. I'll not have milk in this house. No milk, he said. Then all right, Della said. I'll stay. Spring came the way it comes to that country, slow, and then all at once. The bottomland got drained and ditched and fenced dry. The wet, low ground that had held the sickness in its spores turned into good pasture at last, the chain broken for good. The herd was fat on the high grass. The line shack step was solid underfoot. He'd mended it that first cold dawn, and it never gave again. And by the kitchen door of a house that was theirs now hung the oilcloth bundle, the brass and bone needle Amos Corwin made, and his widow carried 11 miles and cured a herd with. The tool she'd been turned away holding hung where a family lived. They took their coffee on the porch in the spring mornings, black and scalding, 2 cups, her hands and his both hard from the same work. There wasn't a lot of talk. There'd never needed to be. There was a wedding, on the same store road, in the same town, in front of the same neighbors who'd stood on that boardwalk and watched Wade Merrick turn a widow off his porch in the cold. They came to it, every one of them. And the men who'd said Corwin luck on that road stood up when Della Corwin walked it in a plain good dress with her chin level, and they toasted her, the disgraced vet's widow, the woman the town had had no wages for, who'd turned out to be the only soul in 3 counties who knew the cure. Because that's the way of it, more often than a town likes to learn. The ones they cast out are so often the only ones who know how to save them. If you've ever been sent away by the very people who'd end up needing you most, you already know what Della knew, standing in that lane with the needle on her hip, deciding whether to walk or stay. So tell me where you're watching from tonight, comment your town, wherever it is, and let's see how far this old story's traveled.